Good evening. Last night, the idea was presented to us of the inner integrity. The fact that when we are thinking, praying, meditating in our religious life, that we must come to the throne with clean hands. We must come with an absolute integrity, no lie on our lips, no deceit. And that this is especially true when we think of the two great commandments of the Master. Thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, and thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. Now, here is a call for complete honesty. Do we love the Lord with all our heart? And the very first answer that we must make as young students, if we would be honest, is, how can I love God? Why can't you love God? Well, look what we're told about God. And look what I've experienced. It seems to me that not only all of my sins have been well punished, but even my little misdemeanors seem to get punishment all out of proportion to their size. And of course I'm told that God rewards my good, but sometimes not in this world. I have to wait for the next world to be rewarded. So here is a God that sees to it that I get well punished in this world, to my way of thinking, overly punished. And if there are any rewards to be handed out, I must wait for another lifetime. And I truthfully can't love that God with all my heart and with all my soul. Also, I'm told that when my relatives pass from view, that we don't know why, but God in his inscrutable wisdom did this. And I just can't love that God that snatches away from me a young child, a young brother or sister or a young parent. I'm even told often that some of the diseases that men and women suffer from is God's way of punishing us or bringing us home to his bosom. And I don't think I can love that God very much. And so, if you are going to maintain an absolute integrity, you would have to eventually answer, as much as I would like to be obedient and love the Lord my God with all my heart, I can't do it. That would at least be coming to the throne with clean hands, and there would be a reward for such an attitude. The reward would be in our being enlightened to the fact that that isn't God at all we're talking about. It is some mortal concept of God, some human concept of God, some man-made creation. But this isn't God at all. That God is too pure to behold iniquity, that God has no pleasure in our dying, turn ye and live, that God does not punish, but rather says that we must forgive 70 times 7, then how much more does God forgive? And so we awaken to the fact that we haven't been thinking about God, we haven't even been taught about God, we have been taught some man-made idea of God, and if you were to trace it, you'd find that that idea of God that is taught comes down to us from the ages even before the Hebrew era, and certainly centuries before the Christian era. And so, with this enlightenment, you would, even though slowly, divest yourself of all of these concepts of God, and you would say, I will no longer believe anything that I hear about God, nothing that I read about God, and nothing that anyone teaches me about God. I will no longer accept my God from a man. How then am I to learn about God? Where did Buddha find his God? While sitting alone under a tree in meditation. Therefore, God was revealed within the consciousness, within the soul, within the mind of Gautama as he sat alone in meditation. Remember, he had had 7 years or more of wandering from teacher to teacher, absorbing all of the different concepts of God that were being taught. He had been told he must be an ascetic, deprive himself of food, of comforts to find God, and it didn't work. He was told many strange things about meditation, and it didn't work. From teacher to teacher for more than 7 years, absorbing all of their ignorance. And he received the light only when he was all alone. All alone in meditation, the enlightenment came, the wisdom came, the knowledge of God, the understanding of God. It was revealed to him within himself. Up to the past few years, we have not known where or how Jesus the Christ received his light. It has been quite a mystery in the theological world, because not only there is no record of his having been ordained a rabbi by the scribes or the Pharisees, but actually he did a great deal of preaching against the scribes and the Pharisees. And it isn't very likely that he belonged to either of those two sects. And there was only one other, and that other hasn't been in good repute with the theological world at any time in the past centuries. The Essenes have been more or less a stepchild or an illegitimate child of Christianity. Nobody wanted to claim it. Nobody wanted to acknowledge it. Now, of course, we are all compelled to, because of the revelation in the Dead Sea Scrolls, that he and John the Baptist were ordained in the Essenes, and it was for this reason that their ideas were so foreign to the scribes and the Pharisees. It was for this reason that the Master could say that you're not going to find God in that holy temple where both the scribes and the Pharisees were sure God would be. It was for that reason that he said, God hath no pleasure in your sacrifices, for that was the Essene teaching, whereas the scribes and the Pharisees were all for the sacrifices and the ceremonies and the rites and the rituals. So at last we do know that he received his light in the order of the Essenes. But as you read the history and the documents of the Essenes during this very period of the Master's instruction and ordination, you will also come to agree in the end that he didn't receive his light from those teachings. For if anything, they would have tended to, well, they would have been like the masters of the Buddha. They would have deprived him of it. They were so filled with do's and don'ts that there was no opportunity for this inner stillness and silence and aloneness, which alone brings the revelation of God. So you could go through the lives of those who have founded religions, the Mohammedan religion, the Persian religion, the Sikh, and you would find in every case that the Revelator was not taught by man. The Revelator found within his own self, or within his own consciousness, the secret. Many of you undoubtedly know Victor Herbert's beautiful melody, "Our Sweet Mystery of Life." Where is this sweet mystery of life to be found? And if you study the works of those who have found it, you will discover that they found it within themselves. They found it within the realms of their own consciousness. What they found when they revealed it is almost alike in every case. As you study the works, the original works of these great masters and revelators, you'll find they were all in agreement on the major points, differing only with the language of their particular day or their particular country or some of the customs in which they grew up. But the answer to loving the Lord thy God with all thy heart, honestly, is you can't, if you are going to accept the God that anyone teaches you. When you come to know God aright, then and only then will you be enabled to really love God and honestly say, I love God with all my heart. Someone will then say, well, how can you if you look around this world and see its disorder, its distress, its chaos? And then you'll say, yes, but I know the reason. It isn't because of God. It is because of the ignorance of God. It is because the lack of awareness within an individual of God. This very ignorance of God separates man from the divine influence. In just the same way that if you were ignorant of your bank account, you would be separated from its use or benefits. But to be in ignorance of God is to be without God. Then, in that ignorance of God, anything can happen, and most things do happen. And as a rule, they aren't nice things. Therefore, regardless of whether 1,000 fall at your left and 10,000 at your right, regardless of the fact that millions may be as branches that are cut off and withereth and die, it will not change your love for God, because you will know that God is in no wise responsible, but that here we are dealing with an ignorance of God, or else an unwillingness to come into at one-ment with God, because when we discover the nature of God, at first our human nature rebels at some of the things necessary to our spiritual fulfillment. And it is said that the flesh wars with the spirit. Our human nature wars with the spirit within us. Our animal appetites war with the spirit within us. What is called our natural desires war with the spirit within us, because the spirit within us does not compromise. It is said to be a jealous God, and that we must love it with all our heart and all our soul and all our might. And the Master graphically describes it in the sense of, you must leave mother, brother, sister, father for my sake. Now, he doesn't mean actually and physically to abandon them, because that would not be loving our neighbor as ourself, but he does mean put them in their proper place. See that you fulfill your human duty, but do not let them interfere with your spiritual development. Do not let it happen to you that you are kept occupied 24 hours out of 24 without your opportunity of inner refreshment and communion. Do not let it happen to you that you cannot go away for a day or a night or a weekend or a week. Do not let it happen to you that your human relationships tie you down to mundane affairs to the extent that you have no time for inner communion. For God is a jealous God, in the sense that if you are not in communion with the Spirit within you, you are not under its direction, its guidance, its orders. You can't hear the still small voice in all of the busy activities of the day. There must be a period of inner quiet, of inner peace. Yes, once we are sufficiently attuned, we could hear the still small voice in a boiler factory. But first there must come that inner attunement so that the outer noises are virtually shut out, because we are locked up inside of ourselves in an inner communion. Then can begin, through this period of meditation or communion, which is always accompanied with a sort of a question mark, the listening ear, as if we are always waiting for revelation, illumination, instruction. And in this way, ultimately, we come to know the mystery of life. In the human scene, there are many people who believe that they understand the mystery of life, because they can trace themselves, their children, from a tiny seed all the way through to birth, from conception to birth. And then they watch the child from birth to full maturity. And so, of course, we in our ignorance believe we know the secret of life. We can trace it back to a seed. But you see, that is not the mystery of life. That is the effect of the mystery of life. What produced the seed? Why is it that in one particular minute there was no seed, and in the next minute there was a seed? what brought this seed into expression. That seed is only present in the mother a certain few days in each month. The rest of the time it isn't there. What brings it there? And no matter how you trace it back physically, you will eventually get to the place where you say, this is the jumping off place. Now what happened before this? In the Farmer's Almanac this year, they predicted a very heavy winter for the eastern and middle western part of the United States. And they said the reason for the prediction is that the animals are growing much thicker fur than normally. And the animals that store up food are storing up more of it. Now, does an animal grow its own fur? Can an animal decide how much fur it's going to grow? Does an animal know that it's growing any fur? Not any more than we know that we're growing hair. And not any more than we have power to say, I'll grow a thick head of hair or a thin head of hair. Then what grows this fur on the animal and grows it thicker in the summer and fall of a coming heavy winter, and thinner in the summer and fall of a coming mild winter? What is there about the animal that does this? What is it that leads an animal to store up more food this year than another? Well, you might say the animal's reading the Farmer's Almanac, but that can't be either. Of course, the answer is obvious to you. It isn't obvious to mankind, because mankind can't trace anything back further than the seed. But all those on the spiritual path know the answer, that every animal has a consciousness. Every bird has a consciousness. Does a bird know east, west, north, and south? Yet the birds fly north in season and south in season, but the birds aren't supplied with maps. Only we need those when we travel, not the birds. They know whither they're going and why, and when. What is there about a bird that knows this? Brain, heart, feet, wings? No. Every bird has a consciousness. And the bird consciousness carries it without volition or will, north and south. The animal's consciousness decides the thickness of its fur or the amount of food that it will store. It even provides its coloring for hiding. Does an animal do that? No. There is a consciousness which acts without conscious volition. Sort of gives meaning to the scriptural passage, he that is within me is greater than I am. I can of my own self do nothing. There is something about me greater than I am. And eventually you'll discover I have a consciousness. You have a consciousness. It is with you up in an airplane. It is with you in the submarine. It is with you on the ocean. It is with you on the earth. Whither can you flee from your consciousness? If you make your bed in hell, your consciousness is there to get you out. If you walk through the valley of the shadow of death, your consciousness is there to get you out, unless you're looking up on the shelf for a medicine bottle. Then your consciousness can't make contact with you, and you are not making contact with it. Now, if you once perceive that God is acting as your individual consciousness, and after a while you actually see how this consciousness of yours leads you just in the way that you must go, then do you not see that for the first time you can be honest and say, oh, how love I my Lord, my God. Oh, how love I this God of creation. Do you see that? Only after you have discerned that God, the infinite, indivisible, functions as individual consciousness, your individual consciousness, can you understand the scriptural passages? I will never leave thee nor forsake thee. I will be with thee unto the end of the world. What will be with you outside of your consciousness? And what will it not do for you if you turn to it? Do you see the secret of meditation? And do you see why only meditation can reveal God to you? Because in no other way are you turning within to your own consciousness. And then you remember the Master called it the Father within me. And he said, I and my Father are one. Certainly, I and my consciousness are one. How can I be separate or apart from my consciousness? Do you realize that a human body can't stand up? Take consciousness from the body and it collapses and falls down. Then the physical body can't stand. Only the omnipresence of your consciousness can make it stand. Could your stomach digest or assimilate a meal? Could your digestive organs assimilate a meal? Well, you know they can't. If consciousness isn't functioning in your body, your stomach, your digestive organs are just dead matter. They can't move. What moves the organs and functions of your body? Is it God up in the sky? Or is it the same consciousness that grows heavy fur for the animal, the same consciousness that governs the birds in their flight, their consciousness, your consciousness? And do you see why it is that your consciousness molds your body in conformity with its need? The Oriental features will be molded in Oriental form in an Oriental family, because anything else would be horrifying. The Occidental consciousness, or the consciousness of an Occidental, will form the features in an Occidental style, because the parents would get in trouble if it did otherwise. Do you see that this consciousness is the all-knowing? And those who are born and must live in tropical and subtropical climates have darker skins. And as you know, in Africa, the very darkest and heaviest of skins as a protection from that heavy sunlight. As we get into the northern and eastern climates, the skin lightens and lightens, and the complexion of the skin changes. Why? Because consciousness is forming it to meet the conditions of where I am. It isn't an unknown God doing this, saying, I'll make you this way and form you this way. It is the consciousness of the individual meeting every need. And that is why you can understand the Master when he says, your heavenly Father knoweth that you have need of these things, and it is his good pleasure to give you the kingdom. Now, who is this Father? Well, he later says, the Father within you. It isn't any father within your body. It isn't anything within your body. It is your very consciousness. Your consciousness knoweth what things you have need of. It provided you with that body, and just the form of body you needed for your present experience. Of course, from the moment of birth, you get separated from your consciousness because somebody starts to warn you about the devil over here and the God up in the heaven over here, and the first thing you know, you're so completely divorced from your own consciousness that you go through life without even drawing on it. You look to everybody in the world for what you need, and then you start blaming those that don't give it to you. When he that is closer to you than breathing, your very own consciousness, is the source, the substance, and the activity of your every experience. And do you see why then, when you go in meditation with the understanding, not that a man 2,000 years ago is your Lord, not that a man 2,500 years ago is your Lord, but that both of those Lords pointed to the fact that the kingdom is within you. Now, I don't know why they didn't have the word consciousness. I don't know why back in the past they dropped or lost the truth that this consciousness isn't one out here, up here, or 2,000 years ago. It's your consciousness. If you mount up to heaven, you take it with you. If you make your bed in hell, it's with you. And no matter what trouble you could get into, your turning to it would instantaneously get you out of it. And all you'd have to do was think back on the animals that grew heavy fur, and then smile. And then say, if their consciousness could provide in advance for a heavy winter, my consciousness can provide for an eternity. All you'd have to do is think of the birds flying and smile, and that would be the deepest kind of praying you could ever do. Just to think of the birds and say, well, Father, if they have a consciousness that's leading them north and south, I have a consciousness also that leads me north, south, east, or west, that fills my storehouses and barns, that fills my clothing closets, with 12 baskets full left over. To know him aright is life eternal. To know that God is your individual consciousness, and that you don't have to enlighten it, it knoweth your need. Before you ask, I will answer, as long as you don't ask up there or look back for 2,000 years. The kingdom of God is neither low here nor low there. It is within you. The infinite way books are written in what we call Christian mysticism. But it could be rewritten. They could be rewritten, every book, and I could do those same books in Hebrew mysticism, Oriental mysticism, Chinese, Japanese, Persian, and I can tell you they'd have the same message because of the revelation that God is consciousness, my consciousness. But I can't say my consciousness and leave you out, because then I have finitized God. If I know that God is my consciousness, and that my God goes with me whithersoever I go, that my God, my consciousness, will never leave me nor forsake me, then if I am not knowing that as a universal truth about good men and bad men, white men and black men, Protestant men and Catholic men and Hebrew men and Vedantist men, if I'm not knowing that universally, I have lost the secret of God as consciousness. I've claimed something for my own that isn't mine exclusively. It is mine individually, but not exclusively. Because there is only one God, there is only one consciousness, but consciousness has a way of giving us the heavy fur in cold winters and light fur in some weathers. And so this God, which is our consciousness, has a way of providing for us in whatever climate we may be, whatever weather we are going through, whatever strata of the air we may be in. This consciousness forms itself, molds itself in accord with our need. Your heavenly Father knoweth your need. Do you see that? Now, once you understand that God is infinite, divine, spiritual, perfect consciousness, yet individual, you have the secret of knowing God. How can you not love that God? Not now, this minute, but after a year in which you have found that that God has gone before you to prepare the way for you, to prepare mansions for you, that that God has walked beside you as a protection, behind you as a rear guard. Then tell me, after a year of relaxing in this infinite divine consciousness and finding the miracle of the mystery of life closer than breathing, tell me then how it would be possible not to love the Lord thy God. Then when you look out at the world and see its disaster and destruction, you can go back to Scripture and read it prophesied. Because you deserted your God. Because you turned away to Baal. Because you thought that storehouses and barns had your security. Because you thought a medicine bottle had your life and your health. Because you thought a lucky charm was going to ward off the evil spirits. Because you turned away from He that is within me. I mean, you can't help smiling. You only have to think of those birds up there. You only have to think of those animals out in the woods, and you can't help smiling when you stop to think that their very own consciousness did this for them without the birds and the animals having to say, Father, how about a heavier overcoat? Or how about taking me out for a vacation this winter? Do you see that consciousness functions without conscious thought? That's where probably the word faith comes in. You see, all of this blind faith that we're taught is a lot of nonsense, because it's a faith in a non-existent God. And that faith falls down. But think of what faith means once you know God aright. Do you then have to take thought for your life, what you shall eat or what you shall drink or wherewithal you shall be clothed? Do you then have to take thought for whether you're going to pass from sight at 30, 60, or 90? No. 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 There is somewhere in this world a postcard showing two birds on the branch of a tree, and they're looking down on a troubled city of people scurrying around troubled. And one says to the other, I wonder what they're so worried about. And the other one says, you know, I don't think they have a God like we do. You see, there's a different meaning for faith. Faith because it is understanding of God. Faith because it is knowledge of God. Faith because it is an ability to commune with God. Oh, once you have that, the world say, oh, you have a great deal of faith. Lots of people say that to me. They watch these travels and they say, oh, how much faith you must have. I think, yes, I have, because I've seen God in action. You'd have faith too if you ever saw this fellow get around. But until you can bring God closer to yourself than your skin, until you can actually realize God to be your very consciousness. And actually, it isn't easy to do, to realize God as your consciousness, unless you can find an illustration like these animals and birds, and then say, yes, the consciousness of the animals in advance did this, met their need. The consciousness of the birds in advance did this thing. Then you can say, then I have a consciousness. And then you can relax. You may not have faith, but at least you can relax. And then after a year of watching how the spring, summer, winter, and fall is taken care of, then you can have faith and say, no wonder I have faith. I know the fella. I've met him face to face. We shake hands every day in meditation. We greet each other. Here I am, Father. Talk to me. And sometimes when he doesn't talk right away, you know him so well, you say, look, Father, if you're not going to play ball with me, I'm not going to be around here when you go looking for me. And that wakes him up. Oh, he comes right alive. He says, all right, son. Because with this, there must be a sense of humor. There must be, or life is going to be a horrible thing. Horrible. If you really can't see that the joke is on us, that all of these years we have believed that you had to get on your knees to get God to do something, or read so many pages in a book, or sing hymns, or sacrifice. The laugh's on us. Okay? Because now we know that all of this is just mythology brought over to us from ancient pagan days, and we've swallowed it. Watch the difference when you know God aright. See? And then read the Gospels and see how different life is presented to you by the Master. I may be wrong, but I can always detect the twinkle in his eye when he's talking out to those multitudes. Why are you fearing? Why are you fearing? Why do you come to me for loaves and fishes? Didn't I show you the mystery yesterday? What did hinder you? Can't you see that look in his face? What did hinder you? Is there some power out there that's going to eat you up or stop you from getting? Come on, get up on your feet. You can see that. Once you have known him aright, well, God is the consciousness of the birds and the bees and the flowers. It's God that clothes them in their beauty and gives them their form and outline and perfume. They all have a God that does such wonders for them, and not we. No. It is only that, as James tells us, we have prayed amiss. We've prayed up in space, or we've prayed back 2,000 years. And we haven't accepted the revealed truth. In my mind's eye, I can see Gautama the Buddha, before he was the Buddha. I can see him walking through all those forests of India, going from teacher to teacher, and being told to sit in the lotus position, and he'd sure find God, or stand on his head, or lie down on a bed of nails, or don't eat meat, or don't pray to God for anything. And the poor man is bewildered, because he does it all. He's honest, he's sincere. He does it all, but he doesn't find God. And then when he throws it all up and decides, here, I'm going to eat a good meal and get comfortable, and he fills his stomach as much as he can hold, sits down under the tree and says, here I am. And there he meets his God face to face, receives his satori, his illumination, his darshan, when he's alone with his God, because his God is closer than breathing. His God is here where I am. And all this time he's been seeking God in practices, exercises, diets, fasting, feasting. And God isn't to be found there. The kingdom of God is within you. Shut out the world. Enter the inner sanctuary of your being. Difficult sometimes, but if you have to stay there for a year, it's worth it. Or 7 years. Because when you find it, it means life eternal. It means you can never die. You may pass from view, but you'll never die. Nor will you ever again be anxious. And no matter what the human appearance or circumstance may be, wars, persecutions, disasters, you'll still keep going right on knowing, oh, well, this is just the mesmerism of the outer senses. My God hasn't deserted me, so if I'm just stand still, the storm will pass and I'll be out in the clear again. It isn't any different than the captain of a ship that has to go through storms, abiding by the principles of seamanship, knowing that if he does stand by his seamanship, that he'll sail right out through the storm and come into the clear again. The storm won't last forever. So with us, there are storms in this human life. After we have come to this spiritual life and are into it for a while, the storms aren't of our own experience. We take on the storms of our families who are not making their demonstration, or our students who are not making their demonstration. Okay? And so we ourselves go through storms. I have always liked Mrs. Eddy's statement that Jesus would not have been crucified if he hadn't taken a single student. Sure not. He took their woes on him, and he fought their battles against entrenched ignorance, organized ignorance. And so, of course, He had to go through all the storms that there were for their sakes. That's really what's meant by he took our burdens on him. Every teacher, every practitioner takes the burdens of their students and patients. They can't help it. They have to sit up nights with it sometime. They have to go weeks and weeks with problems of this one, that one, and the other one. They're always taking on the burden of those that they are trying to lift across this wilderness. But that also makes life interesting, because there too we prove, and no matter how hard the storms, no matter how difficult or deep, we've proved for ourselves, now we'll prove for others, that the way out is to know him aright. I can only share with you my experience. You may have an individual experience of your own that will bring to you the enlightenment as to the nature of God. But my experience is in looking at the animals and the birds, the flowers, and saying, I know, or at human bodies, and say, I know you're just effects. Now, what produced you? What formed you in this particular style? And I see that it must be an intelligence, because it molded us in accord with the need of our particular life at this stage. And so I see that God actually is the all-knowing. It's the all-knowing consciousness with which I was imbued in the beginning. I was with you before Abraham was. Your consciousness was with you before Abraham was. Your consciousness set you on earth, in Egypt, in the Holy Lands, in China, in Japan, Africa, whatever part of the world was necessary to your unfoldment at that time. You may often ask yourselves why you are here, why you are here, why you were born here, and then you'll find something sent your parents here so that you could be born here and not under the same conditions they were born under. And then you'll say, did my parents do that to me, or are they like the birds? Something picked them up and sent them over. Do you see that? Were my ancestors sent out of Spain and Portugal? Did they pick themselves up and move? No, it took a pogrom, persecution. And then something picked them up and sent them over to New York so I could be born in New York. And I'm as sure of that as I'm sure of anything else, that it was my destiny to be born there, to have the benefit of the New York schools, to have the benefit of being brought up in classrooms with Negroes and Irish and Chinese and laundrymen and vegetable men and all the rest of it, and policemen's sons and millionaires' sons, so that by the time we reached maturity, we didn't judge anybody by what they looked or whether they had silk or cotton. We'd all learn to mingle with each other and judge each other by our conduct. That was necessary to the conduct of this particular work. And so I think that my consciousness really functioned my grandparents and great-grandparents, because I was there. My consciousness was moving me from place to place until it got me where it wanted me. And it took a miracle to get me out in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. Not one, but two miracles. So you see, there is a consciousness moving us, a consciousness feeding us and clothing us. But don't stop there until you've realized it's my consciousness. Get the picture of these animals in your mind and these birds in your mind, so that you can see actually that it's their consciousness doing this to them. Then you can say it's my consciousness doing this to me. And in the end you'll realize that the same consciousness is doing this to me is doing it to the birds and to the animals, because there is only one consciousness functioning us at our particular level, whatever that level may be. Do you see that? To know him aright is life eternal. To know him as your consciousness drops all the weight and responsibility. Then you're always turning within to see what it's doing for you. See? And you may gain the wisdom to look within and say, I'm going to have a heavier coat next winter. You can see it coming before it's here. The mystery of life is in knowing God aright. But you don't know God aright until you know God as the infinite divine consciousness that forms the sun, the moon, the stars, the planets, every form of nature and me, and then forms us, governs us, supports us, sustains us, leads us, directs us to our ultimate destiny, which is the realization of our true identity as that consciousness. I don't think we could be brought any closer to God without bunking into him. Thank you.